Hello, my lovely friends. Welcome back to another episode of Poker Mind Expansion. Now, today I would like to talk about Buddhism and its application to mind expansion. There was a prince named Gautama Siddhartha 2,500 years ago, and he made a very large contribution to human consciousness and to mind expansion. And I believe that modern day psychology as well as spirituality undervalue the ancient texts. And I think that it's very important to examine these and think about the meaning of them, because the mental game coaches of the 21st century do not understand themselves. And I think that it's important to understand that after we've been with the training sites for a very long period of time, after we've had multiple coaches, after we've been playing for a while, we begin to realize that things don't quite add up. And this is where, if we are very intelligent, we will start to gather our consciousness and we will start to go within ourselves. And I would like to bow to you, to the Buddha inside you, the great strategist, the creative genius that you are, the vast expanse that is within you. You may not be aware of this fact. You may have not even ever dreamed about it, that you are Buddha, that you are Tesla, that you are Shakespeare, that you are Napoleon. But you cannot be anything else. You are a genius. And this is the very essential core of your being. It is not something that is going to happen in the future. It has already happened. It is absolutely the case. Intelligence is the very source that we come from. It is the source, and it is also the goal. It is from intelligence that we move, and it is back into intelligence that we must go. Now, this one word Buddhahood contains the full circle of life, from Alpha to the Omega. But most people are very fast asleep, and they don't know who they are. Not that they have to become a Buddha, but only that they have to recognize the very fact that they must return to their own source, that they have to look within themselves. Now, there is always a confrontation within ourselves when we reveal that there is a true depth, a much deeper thinker than the mere intellect. In fact, we are intellectual geniuses. A child is absolutely intelligent when he comes out of the womb. It is only until he is forced into the society that his intelligence is destroyed. The day one comes to see who he actually is, the whole existence becomes enlightened, because it is not possible for a person to become enlightened. How could a person become enlightened? The very idea is absolutely absurd. A person, it is not that Jesus said, "I have become enlightened." The fact is that the I has to be dropped before one can become enlightened. So how can I become enlightened? It is absolutely absurd. The day I became enlightened, the whole existence became enlightened. And since that moment, I've not seen anything other than pure genius, pure intelligence, in many forms, and many ways, with 1,001 problems they may believe they have. But they are still absolutely intelligent. They just simply have forgotten. So I bow to your intelligence. And I am absolutely glad that we have so many deep thinkers who are interested in mind expansion. And the very fact of our coming together here on YouTube to think about the ancient wisdom that the sages have left for us throughout history is absolutely the beginning of recognition of truth. The respect in our hearts for them and the love that we have for these great masters is the respect and the love that we have for our own intelligence and for our own creativity. Now, trust in a particular person or tradition is not really a real trust. It is not a trust in something extrinsic to what we are. The real trust is a self-trust. And the fact is that by trusting those who have come before us, we will learn to trust ourselves. And by coming close to truth, we will learn to come close to ourselves. But it is only through a recognition, which is what needs to be attained. The diamond is there, but we've absolutely forgotten all about it. Or you could also say that we've never remembered it from the beginning. It depends on the angle which you look at it from. Now, there's a very famous saying of Emerson: man is God in ruins. And I agree, and I also somewhat disagree, but I do appreciate where it's coming from, very much so. Because the insight does absolutely have a half-truth in it. So, man is not as he should be, I agree. The insight is there, but it's a little bit upside down. Because man is God in ruins is not really painting the whole picture. Man is God in the making. That is much more accurate. Man is absolutely a genius. The bud is there, and it can bloom at any moment, but a little bit of effort, a little bit of help is needed to go in the right direction. Rather than putting our energies outward, we need to begin collecting our energy, collecting our consciousness, and spending more time inside of ourselves. Now, our effort is only going to reveal it to us. Now, what is needed is to help unfold what is already here, what is already hidden, because it is simply a discovery. But the truth is already here, and the truth is absolutely eternal. And I want to discuss some of the ancient sutras and speak about its application to poker and mind expansion, because I've read all of the mental game literature on poker that I could find, and I must admit, I don't want to sound overly critical, but it is absolutely horrible, the majority of it, not all of it. But I would like to give a different vantage point. And when I say horrible, what I mean is that they are solving very superficial problems, but they are never going to the root. Because it takes a great deal of maturity to be willing to look at the root. Most people that go onto YouTube are simply looking for a cookie cutter solution because a thought has come into their mind about a problem and they want to fix this thought. Or a thought has come into their mind previously and they see the title of a video and they say, yes, that's a conflict I have. Let's hear the solution. This is not the mindset that we, as people who are interested in mastery of poker, can afford to take. It is absolutely inefficient, and in fact it does not even get to the peak. It settles for something far more superficial, which I have no interest in, because poker to me is an art. Poker to me is not a means to an end. Poker is an end in and of itself, and I would never be so disrespectful to the game that I love so much. Now, I would like to say that from the very beginning, and from this point, it is important to understand this very fact that Buddhism is trying to tell us. Let it be in our heart that we are all creative geniuses, that we are all Jesuses, that we are all Buddhas. And I know it may look a little bit presumptuous. It may look a little bit hypothetical. And I'm not telling you to trust it. Totally. It's absolutely natural to doubt it. And I completely understand. But let it be there. Let it be there as a seed. Do not reject the idea completely. If you respect yourself. Because around this fact, many things will start happening. And only around that fact will you be able to understand what these sutras mean, what mind expansion is, what it means when we see the multiplicity and the complexity that this game has to offer in terms of strategic decisions that we can make. Now, these are immensely powerful, very small, condensed, seed-like sutras. But with this soil, with the vision in mind that we are all going to become masters of this great game, what we are doing is that we are budding our own intelligence. We're potentially capable of becoming a magnificent flower. There's nothing that is lacking at all. In fact, all of the tools are absolutely ready for us to be able to get better, because we don't need PioSolver. We don't need training sites. We need our own intelligence, but we've been taught to go against our own intelligence and to look to authority. But what we don't understand is the capacity that our imagination has. So when it comes to the realm of the intellect, society is long fixated on very rigid systems for measurement of intelligence. And one of the greatest examples is encapsulated in the enigmatic term called IQ. However, the mystique of intelligence, just like a poker hand, may reveal only a fraction of cards at play. In the vast cosmos of human cognition, there was a great mystic called Ramana Maharshi, and he was a provocator of consciousness. And he also beacons the question, the very essence of intelligence. And he questions what the metrics and their relevance in the orchestra of creativity. Because problem solving and critical thinking in our society are at an absolute low. And poker, a game of strategy, serves as a metaphor for the limitations inherent relying on memorization tactics rather than understanding the game. Now, the cerebral dance around the poker table may demonstrate analytical prowess, but it often fails to capture the ebullient spirit of creativity that courses through the veins of a poker player. Ramana Maharshi whispers in the wind of introspection, and he also urges us to transcend the narrow corridors of the conflict solution mind and delve into the boundless ocean of our imaginative potential. Now, I want you to enter Magnus Carlsen's world for me for a moment. Now, this prestigious chess virtuoso, whose mind orchestrates a symphony of creativity and has conquered the chess battlefield, has a lot to offer us in terms of expanding our current perception of what is actually possible. Now, there's a tale of Carlsen playing 16 simultaneous opponents blindfolded. He was playing chess games against the most elite players, blindfolded, and he beat all of them. His ability to navigate these games and thinking about futuristic moves, counters, playing 10 steps ahead, transcends the constraints of the conventional education system, because the education system has not trained us to think critically. Now, the conundrum with memorization tactics gets absolutely destroyed in the face of a man like Magnus Carlsen. Buddhist philosophy also intertwines with Ramana Maharshi's and also Magnus Carlsen's. And what it does is it hints at a collective consciousness, a shared canvas upon which our creative impulse to paint the tapestry of poker in reality is available. Because When the mind is unshackled from the constraints of conventional thinking, it has the opportunity to transcend the imposed limitations by standardized metrics. Now, creativity is absolutely not free. It is the elusive muse that dances on the edges of our consciousness. But in order to expand our understanding and our creativity, we must understand that 2 + 2 = 4 is not creative. It is absolutely robotic. And we have to move beyond the one-dimensional mathematical, logical type of thinking, the very Aristotelian approach to poker. And we have to go beyond, and we have to become a creative genius and realize that we are not solving for absolutely nothing. We are not solving to break even through GTO. We are attempting to understand the game and master it at a much deeper level. So the question of seeding our consciousness invites us to consider the untapped reservoirs of potential and creative ability within us. But if we focus our energies on memorizing solutions out of PioSolver, and we don't go directly to the root of the problem, we will never become a genius, even though we already have the seed. Now, what if the mind could unfurl like the petals of a lotus, revealing the layers of creative brilliance previously concealed? This is exactly what happens when we start to go within. Now, the convergence of poker, Magnus Carlsen's blindfolded chess, and the mystics' philosophies invite us to really consider a reality where creativity transcends the conflict solution mind. And the mind is not a stagnant pond, but it is a flowing river, inventive in its exploration to understand deeper and deeper aspects of the game, to be able to consider more facets and think about how our opponents will react. Think about what their perceptions are. We must go very deep. This is a very transcendent space that we have, this game of poker. We have transcended the society. We are able to use our intellect to make a living. We do not have to click buttons in a factory. The cards of poker may symbolize our analytical abilities, but it is the hand of creativity that actually shapes this game. Because what it does is it turns each hand, each moment, into an opportunity to be meditative, to allow our genius to flower. What the masters have left for us down the centuries give us the invitation to step beyond the confines of conventional wisdom and really to embrace the wild dance that poker actually is. There are no solutions. There are no answers in poker, and this must be absolutely understood, because poker is very, very, very deep, and there is a deep treasure within our consciousness. But we have to bring a small lamp inside of our house. Once the darkness disappears, there will no longer be the desire to get more, to make this into a means to an end. Because you will be that. You will be a true master of this game. You will be a sovereign. You will be an emperor. And this whole kingdom is yours. And it is just asking for you to claim it. But you cannot claim it if you don't believe that it's possible. You cannot claim it if you cannot even dream about claiming it. If you think that it's impossible to expand your mind. Now, you may believe that it is impossible for you, but you are wrong. You are absolutely incorrect. You may think it is impossible for others. You are certainly wrong, and very arrogant to think so. The idea that you are a beggar, that you are ignorant, that you are a sinner, that we have been preached to so many times. We've been told that we are not good enough, but we need to go to the training sites and we need to take coaches' advice. We need to look to the authorities for help. But the truth is that these training sites are absolutely bold-faced lying. In fact, they believe their own lies because they've lied to themselves, because they themselves are afraid. So if this hypnosis is broken, which is what we need, then we will find the treasure that we have within us. So to start with, I absolutely salute the genius that is within you. And to me, you are a genius. And all your efforts, though, to become a great genius by memorizing PioSolver, by going to training sites, to me are absolutely ridiculous. Because you cannot accept the basic fact that you already have everything within yourself. And this has to become the most fundamental thing in our understanding, that our imagination is already enough. This is the right beginning. Otherwise, people go astray because they don't lay the foundation. They don't create a framework in which things actually can be true when they discuss poker. This is the most important beginning. We must start with a vision. And we don't have to be worried that we're going to create some kind of ego saying, I am very creative, I am very good. Don't be worried, because the whole process of mind expansion will make it very clear that the ego is the only thing that doesn't exist. The only thing that doesn't exist. Everything else in poker is real. Everything else in life is real. There have been many teachers that say the world is illusory and the soul is existential, and the I is true and all else is illusory, Maya. But Gautama Siddhartha Buddha himself says just the opposite. He sees only the I as untrue, and everything else is real. And I certainly agree much more with Buddha than with any other standpoint. It is far more true, because Buddha's insight is very penetrating, the most penetrating, because most ordinary sages want to please the ego of the perceiver. But we as poker players do not have time to go to a mental game coach to simply be told things that reinforce our current ideas. We have to go far beyond the limited mind and the egoic identity that we are. Now let it be declared to every cell of our body and to every thought in our mind. Let it be declared to every nook and corner of our existence that we are a creative genius. You don't have to be worried about this I cannot say I am a genius. We will figure this out through all the other episodes of Mind Expansion and through the meditation that we do. But I and an expanded mind can never exist together. And once the mind expands, it reveals that there is much more than I. In fact, the I simply evaporates, just like darkness disappears when you bring in light. Now, before entering more talks, it's going to be very helpful to understand a sort of framework. And I'll use the Buddhist tradition because it's very true and it's very relatable. It's a very appropriate framework to view the problem. Now, there are a variety of religions that talk about the number 7. In Buddhism, they talk about the 7 temples. The Sufis, which are Muslims, they talk about the 7 valleys. And the Hindus talk about 7 chakras. So we're going to talk about this number 7. And the first one, you could say it corresponds to the first temple in Buddhism, is the physical. Now, the second temple is the psychosomatic. The third temple is the psychological. The fourth temple is the psycho-spiritual. The fifth temple is what is called spiritual. And the sixth temple is the transcendental. And the seventh temple is the ultimate temple of the temples. It is absolute transcendence. So the men who have transcended the mind and gone beyond are people who have entered the seventh temple, the absolute, the totality. That is the meaning of the Sanskrit word pragyaparmita, the wisdom of God, of the beyond, in the beyond. The wisdom that only comes when you have transcended all kinds of identities, higher, lower, this world, the other world, low stakes, high stakes. All these have to be transcended. We can no longer label different poker players with one-dimensional words and assume we understand the meaning of that. But we have to think about how our opponent sees. We have to put ourselves in his shoes. We have to become our opponent. And the only way to become our opponent is to know ourselves first. It is absolutely fundamental to understanding what it is that our opponents are misunderstanding, and that comes from understanding their irrationality, because they do not understand that they are playing a great deception upon themselves when they play. They don't realize that their strategies are simply to defend their ego. They are not to maximize EV. But they are fast asleep, so they do not have the capacity to understand this. We can only use the pure flame of awareness. We cannot have any smoke around it. There is a small book, and they have called it the Heart Sutra, and it is the very core of the Buddhist religion. And it is got lots of wisdom within this beautiful book. Now the first temple, the physical, can correspond with the Buddha. In fact, actually, let's use Hinduism because that's a little bit of a better example. The Hindu map uses the chakras. So we'll go through each of the chakras and explain what temple this corresponds to. So the Muladhara chakra is the first. The second is the psychosomatic, which you could call the Svadhisthana chakra. Now the third is absolutely psychological, and this is very important to understand that the first three have a lot of similarities. Now the fourth is psycho-spiritual, which is called Anata. The fifth is simply spiritual, and we call this Vishuddha. Now the second is called spiritual, which is transcendental, but it is not the seventh. Now when you get to the seventh, Agya, it is full transcendence with Shahara. Now Shahara means 1,000 petaled lotus, and it is the symbol of the ultimate flowering for mind expansion, because nothing else is hidden, and it all becomes unhidden and manifest. The 10,000 petaled lotus has opened the whole sky, and it is filled with fragrance, beauty, benediction. In fact, I would call it a 1,000,000 petal lotus. In the modern world, great work begins in search of the innermost core of a human being. This is absolutely fundamental. I've read over 100 biographies, and I've also read hundreds of other books on psychology, on sociology, on philosophy, on game theory, etc. And I would say that the most important teaching in everything always goes back to understanding ourselves. I did not start this path looking for something spiritual. In fact, I was looking for how to get better at poker. And I realized that after reading hundreds and hundreds of books and spending so much time on the training sites, investing everything, my blood, my sweat, and my tears, I got absolutely nothing. And I came across a book that seemed very contradictory, it seemed very paradoxical, and it did not make sense. But I continued to read and investigate, because even though the book that I started had many paradoxes and contradictions, and I disagreed with a lot of the ideas of the author, he put into words a number of ideas that I had never heard conveyed. Two ideas that were associated, which I thought had nothing to do with each other. He was able to create a synthesis and allow me to understand myself better. So I started using these methods for meditation, and I started understanding myself better. My searches had nothing to do with the spiritual side until my enlightenment. I did start meditating 8 hours a day, but this is absolutely not necessary. In fact, Gautama Siddhartha went 6 years using different methods before he had self-realization, before he had the first death. It's very important to understand the deeper parts of our society and understand why we are conditioned and the ways that we are conditioned and the ways that we are taught to think in a very one-dimensional box. And it's good to understand how far modern efforts have led us. There is Pavlov, and there are other behavioralists who go on circling around the physical, and they don't understand that man is more than the body. They think man is only the body. So they get involved in the first temple. They get so involved with the physical that they forget everything else. And these people are trying to explain man only through physical material. This attitude becomes a hindrance because they are not open. When from the very beginning you deny that there is anything other than the body, then you deny exploration itself. Now this becomes a prejudice. There was a communist, a Marxist, a behavioralist, an atheist. People that believe that man is only the body. And their beliefs absolutely close the door to higher realities. They become completely blind. And the physical is there. And the physical is the most apparent. And there's no need for proof. The physical body is here. You need not prove it. The sun is there. You need not prove it. Because it need not be proved. It becomes the only reality which they know. And that is absolutely nonsense. Then the man loses all of his dignity. He thinks about everything he does in a very one-dimensional way. There's nothing to grow into or grow toward. Then they've lost all their dignity because they often work a job that they do not enjoy. They often become a slave of a life full of pain that they don't like. And their goal becomes to create a revolution, fix the outside world because only the physical exists. Then man becomes a commodity. And you are not opening yourself up. You are not being vulnerable to life. You are not being creative. Nothing more is going to happen from the first temple. You are simply the body. You will eat, you will defecate, you will die. Maybe you will have sex and produce some children. And this will go on, and then it's over. So it's a very mechanical repetition of the mundane trivia. So there's no significance in any of that. There's no meaning, there's no poetry, there's no dance, there's no love. Now, Skinner wrote a book called Beyond Freedom and Dignity, and it should be called Below Freedom of Dignity, not Beyond. This man was an absolute moron. Now, he made great contributions to our understanding of psychology for the very superficial slave of society. But Gautama Siddhartha figured this out 2,500 years ago. And he did not figure out that we are only made of the physical. In fact, Gautama Siddhartha made it very clear that non-existence and existence and life and death and material and non-material are all one, because they are all a projection of what we are. There's nothing wrong with the body. I'm not going against the body. The body is absolutely perfect. I am not one of these religious people who punishes their body, who fasts, who does not allow themselves to have sex. Absolutely not. That also is very ugly, because it comes from a place of repression. It is not natural, and we must get back into our natural state. Now, man can be convinced that simply there is no ladder, and that you are only at the first tier of your body. And with this rung, you stay forever, because you are identified with this and it feels safe, because you feel that you know, because you can prove. But they are not going to go anywhere, so we will not discuss this too much longer. Because I assume that most people that are coming to this understand that their imaginative and creative abilities are far beyond what the society would ever like to see, because it would be very dangerous for the society to have a creative genius. It would be very dangerous if people were more interested in music than in proving their side correct and in fighting these hallucinated enemies. Now, it's important to understand that the first step is absolutely beautiful. And the ladder is there, and it bridges this world and the other world. And the bridge is magnificent. So the first rung is perfectly good, assuming that it's used in relationship to the whole ladder, and it functions as a first step. Then it can be very beautiful. One should be very thankful to the body. But if you start worshipping the first rung and you forget the remaining 6, you forget that the whole ladder exists, and you become very close, confined to the first rung, to the material. And then it is no longer a rung at all, because you want to go and fight the enemy. You want to go and create a revolution. You want to get lower taxes, and you don't understand that you are a slave of your emotions. So people who are materialistic are always stuck, because they always feel that something is missing. They don't feel that they're going anywhere. They move in circles, round and round and round. And they come again and again to the same point. And they become tired and bored, and they look for a new thing. And then they start contemplating suicide. There's a reason why in the West people commit suicide at much higher rates, because they have everything already materially. And they have not gone and expanded their mind and got in touch with their soul. But in the East, in, you could also say, poorer countries, where people have to worry about their survival and just getting enough bread, they don't have time to worry about mansplaining, because they're trying to pay their rent. They're trying to make sure that their kids have food. So these kind of games that people play with themselves are ultimately not anything that has importance unless one has extreme time on their hands. And they simply want to stroke their own ego, but they don't want to look inside themselves. Their whole effort in life is to find some sort of sensation or something new that can happen. But what is actually new that can happen? All the things that we go on being occupied with are nothing but toys to play with. There's a new news story. And what is the meaning of that? Why do we care? because we want to tell our friends about something and then they will listen to us and we will feel connected. Well, we could just love our friends without having these kind of games that we play with ourselves. But intimacy is very scary, especially intimacy with ourselves in meditation, because there's nothing else to cling on to. There was a man who gave a quote, I cannot remember who it was exactly, but he said something like, the soul of man is crying for purpose or meaning. And a scientist says, here's a telephone. Or he says, oh look, here's a television. Exactly as one tries to distract the baby from crying, for offering it sugar sticks and making funny faces at the little baby. But the leaping stream of invention has served extraordinarily well to keep people occupied since the Industrial Revolution. And then, even more so, since greater technologies have been created. Like the radio has gone mainstream, the television, now the internet, and now we are coming into the time of AI. The problem is that leaping from invention to invention has only distracted man from himself. All that we have in the modern world are simply sugar sticks and toys to play with. And if you were crying for your mother, and you were crying for love, you were crying for consciousness, you were crying for some significance in life, all they did was say, hey, look, here's a television. Here's a telephone, here's a computer. Let me distract you. But the truth is that we have to expand ourselves and start to discover who we really are. Because there are people that may watch this video, but do they observe their behavior 24 hours a day? Can you think of people that watch videos on self-improvement, but they still waste all of their time doing things that don't matter, like watching videos on self-improvement? Rather than expanding their mind, rather than meditating, they need to listen to someone to tell them to do it. It's absolutely fine. And it's very important. But self-improvement is not the way. This is not self-improvement. This is understanding ourselves. And if you understand yourself, then you understand that you are already perfect. And your imposition, your presupposition, your preconceived idea that you are not perfect already is simply a false belief. So rather than trying to perpetuate this false belief because you don't understand yourself, work on watering the seed of your consciousness. The state of affairs in this world is absolutely absurd. And it is absolutely so absurd that it seems inconceivable that we are actually living in it. There are human beings who believe that there are other human beings that are good or bad, depending on the country they live in, depending on how they will affect the perceiver's body and their story. If you're born in America, you think maybe if you're intelligent, you think America is a great hypocrite. But if you're born in America, it's much more likely that you are nationalistic, you are for America. If you're born in Russia, it's very likely that you might not be for someone like Stalin, but maybe you're for Putin, or maybe you don't like Putin. But certainly you're not allowed to voice that. We're born into certain places and we are told this is who we are, and we are given identities. But we are far deeper than the superficial identities that have been inherited and passed on to us. It's very important to remember that not for a single moment am I hinting that you become against your body. That's already starting to deny the body, and that's what these so-called fake spiritualists have been doing down the ages. People like Mahatma Gandhi, who torture themselves in order to win friends and influence people. Now, he did do a good job in India, helping them find freedom from Great Britain. But as far as a spiritualist, he did not know anything about himself. He was not a man of enlightenment. He was a very repressed man. But the society likes to give big medals of honor to people that torture themselves because they say this is a great saint. The point is not to have a good self-image in the eyes of other people. The point is to be free. But society perpetuates the game of the ego. Now, this is a very, very extreme reaction that Gandhi does. He says, the ego wants food, I'm not going to eat food, but he doesn't understand that the ego is a psychological parasite in his mind. It is not his body. He is the body. But he is deeper than the body. He is life itself, but the only way that he can manifest in this world and exist is through eating. But there is an idea, there is an illusion that eating less will help your meditation. You don't understand yourself, and it may actually help a little bit initially, but post-realization, it is seen to be a delusion. Now, the materialist creates his own reaction in the spiritualist. The atheist who says there is no God is just as foolish as the theist who theorizes about God, but does not know. You see, it's beyond this duality. God is absolutely beyond this duality, because God is going back to our natural state, becoming one. The body is beautiful, and the body is real, and it has to be lived, and it has to be loved. The body is a very great gift that this existence has given us. So not for a single moment should we be against it and starve ourselves. We should not try to avoid having sex. Celibacy is absolutely repression. It is completely unnatural. And the whole point of spirituality, the whole point of mind expansion is to go back to our natural state. So we are able to expand our minds and not have presuppositions as to how we should behave. But the mind cannot understand freedom because it wants to say, I am going to be like this kind of person. I want to be a good person. But what does that mean? That means that I look around for people and judge them and say, these are bad people and I'm going to be better than them. So my identity is off of their backs. But of course, the people that perceive themselves as good will be very offended by this. But the people that perceive themselves as bad may also feel this is absolutely true. But the people that feel that it is bad have simply just bought into the game of society. And they are not actually bad. Now, in Freudian psychoanalysis, there are a few methods that they use. And they go higher than Skinner and they go higher than Pavlov. Now, Freud actually enters the mysteries of the psychological mind a bit more. So Freud realizes that, oh yes, the past actually has much more of an influence on us than simply our body. Our psychology is very important. He's not a behavioralist. In fact, he doesn't go beyond dreams. His job, Sigmund Freud, is to analyze dreams. Now, the dream exists as an illusion. It is indicative, it is symbolic, and you can say it has a message from the unconscious to be revealed to the conscious. But there's no point in just getting caught up in it. Use the dream, but don't become the dream. The problem is that Freud was far more interested in the content of the dreams rather than the dream character. And there's not too much need to talk about the Freudians, because it's very obvious that the point of spirituality is to have an awakening where we wake up out of the dream, not spend our entire life going to a psychologist, talking about our past dreams. The point is to realize that the dream character is not who we are. It's just who we are currently identified with. But these methods do not work from the place of consciousness, because these men are not conscious. The point is to find consciousness. The point is to expand ourselves, expand our imagination. But these are very beautiful men because they have contributed greatly to our own understanding, and they have certainly reduced the suffering of others. But they did not understand themselves, and we have to go beyond them, because their entire effort seems to be going into the dimension of the dream world. It's very reasonable, and it's a good standpoint, but it's simply another stepping stone. It's very important to understand that there is no other human being who can actually analyze our dream. If you cannot analyze your own dream, nobody else can. Because your dream is your dream. You cannot superimpose yourself into someone else's brain. The problem is that because the society relies on one-dimensional thinking and language, The sleepwalking man starts to believe in language, believe in the models that he sees, and he thinks that when he says the word rose in a discussion, he thinks that everybody sees the same picture as him. But what does rose mean to him? When he was a child, his grandmother passed away, and there was a vase of red roses, and it was given to him, and he always held on to these roses, and he kept them, and he still has them on his cupboard, and he thinks about his grandma. And when he sees a rose or he hears the word rose, it always associates with his grandmother. But when he says rose to his friend, in fact, his friend always has the idea about his first love and the romantic times before he got married to this woman that he does not enjoy. And he has a little bit of resentment, and he always thinks of the good old days. And this brings up a bittersweet taste. And then another man is a gardener, and he is absolutely passionate about plants. He loves life. He loves the perfection of a rose, and he does not have the same kind of story. Everybody perceives things very differently. Now, no person can ever dream in the way that we dream, or that I dream, or that you dream. Nobody will ever dream in the same way, and nobody can explain it to you, or explain it to me, because the interpretation of the perceiver is only his interpretation. This is why you see a poet and you see different critics, and they're all saying this is the meaning, that's the meaning, but they don't understand that the meaning is always self-created, because they are all dreaming of the world, because they are in the matrix. Most poker players who are far more intelligent begin to understand that all meaning is self-created, because they've thought very deeply about strategy, because they have had to fight their opposition and win. But the ordinary man in the matrix does not realize that everything is self-created, so he goes on believing in the other. Now, you can go on believing in the other, but it is simply a dream. And in fact, there's no need to analyze these dreams whatsoever. Look at the dream in its totality, with clarity, with alertness, and you will see the entire message, because it is so loud. There's no need to go to a psychologist for 3, 5, 10 years. A person who is dreaming every night and in the day is going to a psychoanalyst to be analyzed. And what happens is he becomes more and more surrounded by dreamy stuff, just as he also becomes very obsessed with the physical. And he becomes very obsessed with the physical world and getting more. And you could say that the second becomes more obsessed with the sexual because he's more psychological. And this is where Freud says that a lot of our repression comes from sexuality. Now, again, this is not the whole forest, but this is a very large set of trees in our society. And one could say that it is a projection of Sigmund Freud. Absolutely, this is correct. But it's also the way that we are conditioned to hate our own sexuality. We are all wild animals. We are human beings. We are natural beings. We are gods. We are beautiful and we are perfect. But we have been taught to hate our own race. We have been taught to hate our own gender. We have been taught to hate ourselves and our own bodies because they are not good enough, and we need to have a six-pack. We need to have large breasts. We need to have a big penis. But these things do not matter. These are just ways that the society teaches us to hate ourselves. So certainly there is a great amount of insecurity around sexuality within the society, but it is all conditioned. Animals do not have this insecurity because this insecurity is conditioned by the society. But people believe if you take off your clothes and you run around them, they will say, this guy is crazy. But he's not crazy. The person that can have a reaction where they think something so natural is wrong is crazy. But the ego can never admit this. And this is why poker players have to go far beyond. And it doesn't mean to take off your clothes, of course. What it means is to look at the reactions in our fellow human beings and see their irrationality and see what the meaning of that is. We don't want them to take off their clothes because there are other humans that might see it. Well, what is the meaning of that? One day they will be old, they will have children, so what is the situation? Why is it that we are so hypocritical in our society? Now, this also helps us look at what the training sites are doing as well to their customers. because it makes a very, very, very difficult situation for all the new poker players that end up coming in, because they're fed absolute nonsense, because they're given rote memorization strategies. They are not taught how to think critically about the game from first principle. They are not immediately taught that this is a 4th Street game. And you can never think about a situation in the game as isolated from anything else. It's not how poker works. Now, sexuality has some small part, but the problem is that the mind always focuses on a particular problem, but it does not want to look at the operating system it is using. So it will always find an identity of what's wrong in myself, and then I need to improve it, without really going deeply into the actual problem. Now, Freud reduced every single poem, every single piece of music, every beautiful perfume, everything into sexuality. He said Michelangelo was not a great artist. He actually said that Michelangelo's art was simply some sexual perversion. Now, I would say that Sigmund Freud must have been very repressed sexually in order to come up with these ideas. And it's also true. These things also have very deep truth. But it's important to understand that Freud could have gone beyond. But millions of people were stopped from masturbation because they were afraid they were becoming too sexual, without understanding that the self-hatred and the beliefs around sexuality being bad that have been perpetuated by the religious establishment and the society have been absolutely false. Because Sigmund Freud is the master. I will not call him the sexual master, because this may be too complimentary. I would say that he is the master of the world of the bathroom. And that's where he lives. That is his ashram. That is his temple. When art becomes pathology and poetry becomes pathology and everything becomes perversion, this is the world that he lives in. But again, this is just the second rung of the ladder. Shakespeare was a sexual deviant. Mozart was a sexual deviant. Wagner was a sexual deviant. Van Gogh was a sexual deviant. But I've read the biographies of all of these men that I just stated, and they were not. I mean, maybe Angela a little bit, but anyways, he was beautiful, and it wasn't devious. It's just his style. And sexuality is so natural as well. But what Freud was able to do was he was able to reduce greatness into mediocrity. According to Sigmund Freud, someone like Jesus Christ or Gautama Buddha would have been very mentally ill, because whatsoever he was talking about would be nothing other than repressed sexuality. This approach reduces human greatness into ugliness, and I would be very aware of it, because Jesus Christ is not mentally ill. Buddha is not mentally ill. These are mystics. These are men of enlightenment. But Sigmund Freud is very ill. The silence of a Jesus or a Buddha, the joy, the celebration, the love, the equanimity, the full flowering of well-being is not something that Sigmund Freud has the capacity to understand. Because Sigmund Freud has never sang a song. He's never danced. He's never played like a child. He was a very serious man. He never meditated. He's never done anything creative. He goes to the office, he comes home, he eats, he drinks, he sleeps, he dies. He does not leave a trace of creativity behind. He does not leave a single signature anywhere. This normal man seems to be very mediocre, dead, dying. In fact, he was terrified of death. He felt as though that he had to box in the entire humanity into third-rate people, because he was insecure of his own mediocrity, and he was scared of his own sexuality. Now, it's been almost an hour, and I would like to continue, but I will continue on the next episode. I love you all very much. Thank you for watching, and we will speak with you soon. Mwah.